This is the Youth Baseball Edge podcast with Rob Tong, session number 149.
Boy, I would reconsider your current course.
Well, it'll take more than a scary voice to make an entry-level kid get better.
Get in the know and get the edge. It's the Youth Baseball Edge podcast. And now, your host, Rob Tong.
Welcome to the Youth Baseball Edge podcast. I'm Rob Tong, the host of the show, where the goal of the show is to separate misinformation from true information about coaching youth baseball and get you practical, actionable content. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today's episode of Youth Baseball Edge is sponsored by Driveline Baseball, one of my favorite sources of youth baseball training information. And Driveline has a special offer just for YBE listeners, so keep listening to catch that offer later in today's show. And speaking of later in today's show, stick around to the end of the show where I'll give you a helpful reminder as well. Now, back in sessions 77 and 78, we had Marty Shupak on the show to talk T-ball and give some tips for coaches of T-ball teams. But what if you have a team of beginner-level players who are not T-ball age? Maybe you're coaching in rec at 6U or 7U or 8U. What do you do there? Well, Justin Sherman from justintimebaseball.com is here to help you reconsider your current course.
Boy, I would reconsider your current course.
Dude, we're on it. Anyway, if you have a T-ball team like 4 years old or 5 years old, Justin's stuff will, of course, also work for your team as well. So let's get to it, shall we? Here's part one of my interview with Justin Sherman. My guest today played for Westchester Community College and Purchase College, both in New York. He later was the assistant coach at Purchase before eventually starting his business, Just-in-Time Baseball, which specializes in helping entry-level baseball players to improve their skills. Justin Sherman, welcome to the show.
Rob, thank you very much for having me on. And really, I listened to your podcast within the last couple of days, and I'm a big fan of yours. I think especially the title, the topic of helping youth baseball coaches, parents is vital, absolutely vital. So I'm a big fan of yours.
Well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so again, thank you again. Basically, I was one of these players growing up that obviously loved baseball, but not one of these players that got signed or played at a big Division I school. I was always that scrappy kid that kind of just always had to prove to other people and more so to myself what I could do. You know, in high school, I got cut from my junior varsity baseball team, and that's a big part of the reason why I'm into coaching. I'll dive into it further. But basically, I got cut, went up to the coach. He thought I was going to go after him with a bat or something in the parking lot, but I genuinely just asked, I said, Coach, I didn't make the team. What can I do to make this team? He told me some things, definitely needed to work on them, and it just opened my eyes like, wow, I have to work that much harder. Ended up making the varsity baseball team. I promise there's a reason for this story. Ended up making the varsity baseball team barely by the skin of my teeth, and ended up playing 2 years at Westchester, like you said, Westchester Community, which was a great stepping stone. I recommend players doing that and taking advantage of a opportunity like that, especially, and very good baseball. And then ended up playing at Purchase College and coach, like you said. But the moral of the story is I've always had that chip on my shoulder to work 10 times harder than I had to, or just perseverance. And I was never one of those kids that played Division I pro and just always had a scratch and claw. And that's kind of in my DNA. I have a soft spot for that entry-level player because I was that player once, and it's important to have mentors and great leaders in the game, someone like yourself, to believe in the kids and also teach life lessons through the game. And that's what kind of geared me into this coaching. But that's what got me into this realm of youth baseball coaching, and I know we'll dive further into it.
So that's kind of interesting because I've had discussions in prior episodes about the nature versus nurture argument. So as regarding perseverance, do you think that is something, because you mentioned in your DNA, so do you think that is something that you were born with, or do you think that is something that, was instilled in you?
It's a great question. And, my parents are very hard workers. They were both business owners, still business owners to this day. And I guess the work ethic factor, it runs in our family. We have a lot of hard workers in our family and great parents. I'm very thankful for them. They really are right behind every move I'm making. So I'm very thankful. I would watch this great team called Mamaroneck High School, and I tell this story all the time, and I'd watch their practices, and they just outworked everybody. They didn't do anything unique. They just put 5 times, 10 times more effort and repetitions. And I said, wow, this is after I got cut from the JV baseball team. I said, wow, if I just up my efforts and up my repetitions, things will change. So frequency, that really, as weird as that sounds, by watching this high school baseball team, by upping efforts and upping frequency, I saw the more I did, the more I can do. So I guess it's a combination of both nature and nurture. That answers the questions.
You're kind of like Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan was cut from his JV team and he ended up like, not in terms of skill necessarily, but at least in terms of your tenacity. So is that something that you currently do when you work with the kids who are just starting to get into the game? Is perseverance, is tenacity, some grit, something that you work with the kids on, or is that something that they get from their parents?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I instill it. And I say this to every single group and clinic. I say this to every single kid. We work with kids as young as 4 years old. That's how young we start. I say this to every kid. I said, do I care about you being the best or your best? And I said this on my Instagram this morning. I said, all I care about, and I believe a great youth coach should do, obviously teach the fundamentals. That's besides the point. But motivational wise, you just want to praise a great attitude and great effort, because that's life lessons through the game, right? I mean, those are the 2 real main things you could control in your life, especially in baseball. You could smash a ball at a shortstop and they catch it. You know, you can't control that, but you can control how hard you hit the ball. It's the same thing in life, and everything else in baseball for sure is just controlling your attitude and your effort. I'm very, very, very adamant about that message to every single one of our 500 just-in-time players.
So we'll get back to that later, and if I forget, remind me, because I definitely want to continue to touch on that. So before we get there, though, what is your favorite memory from your playing days? Just something you want to share, whether it's from your youth playing days or high school or college.
I mean, really getting cut from the JV team was a big life moment. It was like Forrest Gump when you got that fork in the road when he, at the end with Jenny, What road was he going to take? I was about to quit baseball. Like, I love baseball, but I'm like, you know what, maybe I could do golf, or maybe I could do this, which, you know, is all good. But I said, look, I just have to work harder. And I could have very easily not been a baseball coach right now and been like in a completely different field, I guess you could say, or like career. But that moment, by getting cut from the JV and just saying to myself, I have to work 10x harder, because I was at best average. And I just said, I got to work harder. And that moment really was defining for my career, and a great moment for me, because it showed that if you work hard, persevere, things could happen and you could strive for your own potential.
Fantastic. Now, again, I'd like to circle back to that later. I think this is really important, so we'll come back to it. But first, I'd like to get people to know Justin Sherman a little bit better before we get into helping our beginning players to understand the game better. So let's hit into some lightning style about me questions, and then following that, we'll do some word association questions. You ready?
I love it. I love it.
No, you don't.
Favorite team?
Mets.
Favorite player?
Joey Votto. Favorite
movie?
Godfather 2. Gotta be. Or Sandlot. It's a tie. Sandlot and The Godfather.
Morning person or night person?
I'd say morning, more so now. Morning person, for sure.
Favorite book?
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's like the ultimate.
Favorite quote?
The only thing that stays the same in life is change. I believe that was Winston Churchill.
Favorite drill?
Very good question. Anything that you could do individually or with a partner.
Last book you read?
Last book I read, Winning by Tim Grover. Excellent book. Trainer for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Excellent book.
Favorite coaching tool or resource?
More so nowadays, video and, game footage, video. That really tells the story.
Something you used to believe that you now know is wrong.
Great question. So there's a long answer. I know it's a lightning round, but self-inventory, it's always on the coach and how they can adjust to a drill. And this is something we'll dive into, but it's always on the coach, no matter how old the kid is. So I used to think they're just 5 years old, they don't get it. No, it's actually the way you're explaining the drill. and the organization. So taking more self-inventory, that's something I wish I would have known like a couple years ago.
Something you believe that others think is crazy?
Great question. Kids could do more than we think.
And now word association, first thing that comes to mind with the following words or phrases. Practices.
Love it.
Fun.
Baseball.
Youth baseball skill development.
Vital.
Catching a baseball.
Essential.
Travel ball.
Oh, it's a touchy subject. Could be great at times. Could be a child's worst enemy.
Base running.
Essential.
Rec league baseball.
Essential.
Throwing.
Smooth.
Hitting.
Also smooth.
Pre-game.
Structure.
Old school versus new school.
Old school.
And finally, bad cues.
Listen up. Heads up. Yeah, those are two big ones.
Great. So let me circle back to the last book you read. You said it was Winning by Tim Grover. So I'm kind of curious. What's a quick synopsis of what made that book so good for you?
You are a fantastic interviewer. So it's just fascinating. He tells all the stories about Kobe Bryant on how he would basically essentially practice 3 times a day, 3 times in a 24-hour span for a 2-hour session. So essentially practicing 6 hours a day, and also listening to the training schedule of Michael Jordan. And just from a training perspective, obviously you and I both in the training coaching business, just the way he went about it, it really wasn't necessarily the actual mechanics of the coaching, but it was more of having empathy for the players and just trying to get every little inch. What little inch more could he get on the next trainer, on the next player to put his clients ahead? And I found that fascinating because I try to strive for that. It was reassuring. As a coach, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, like I'm always trying to do that. Like, what else? What's next? And also that winning isn't fair. Just you talk about grit. It's not fair. There's no balance. There's no such thing as balance. For anything to do successfully, there's no balance. You have to be obsessed. And some of it's reassuring. Some of it is a wake-up call that I got to do more.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think that gets lost among some of the younger kids. So you mentioned getting empathy from the players, and I think that is so important, but it's also yet so evasive. So what are some lessons that you learned from the book that helped you to become more empathetic, or how would you describe a way for coaches who are listening to this to become more empathetic?
Yeah, so the book, I mean, they're talking at the big. Now, again, it's essentially people are people. So empathy, no matter whether you're 6 years old or whether you're Michael Jordan, like having empathy for the players is vital. So I would just say this helped me. I just finished my master's as well about 2 months ago in physical education. I was very fortunate to have great professors and great coaches along the way. But they would always say to me, like, when a drill is not working, and again, this ties back to exactly what you're saying, where empathy. How would you feel in that drill? If they're kicking dirt and there's 9 players standing on a line and 1 person is waiting, how would you feel if you're that 1 person standing in the line? So by thinking in the player's shoes and empathy, and also like, for example, if a kid's not understanding a drill, is that really their fault, or is it just because you're not explaining it properly? Mm-hmm. So that really, like having that growth mindset is so important, and it will instantly make you a better coach. Once it will put you instantly on that better track to becoming a better coach once you understand that. Because I don't think you could be a great coach without those principles. I really don't believe that. Or teacher.
I totally agree. Like, not everyone kind of understands where you're coming from. Like, some will and some won't. And so if you only reach like half your audience, then the other half is left behind. And so a good coach, as difficult as it can be, needs to be able to find a way to reach the kids who are left behind.
Absolutely.
Let's say you've got a team, whole bunch of kids still learning the game, whether they're complete newbies or they're just some kids, 5, 6, 7-year-olds who are kind of young. Mom or dad signed them up, so it's not like select or travel ball where kids are like, hey, sign me up, I want to play. So some of these kids may not even want to be there. So Justin, what's your general philosophy for coaches when they're in that kind of scenario?
Great question. It's got to be fun. And the emphasis needs to be on, like I say to every player, I truly believe, and look, I'm always learning, you and I both are always learning, is to tell kids to just strive for their own potential, because they could be in an entry-level program and little Johnny's catching 10 balls in a row, no problem. But, Peter is, not even able to put his glove on and not able to jog without tripping or whatever. So it's really important to emphasize striving for their own potential, because that's when kids get discouraged. They look at their other friends and they're like, I'm not good, I give up. Baseball's hard, just like any other sport. So emphasizing from the get-go what your principles are, almost like your mission statement. And I tell this to my entire staff. Like, we don't care about how good. We care about you trying to reach your own potential and trying to build a positive, strong environment and learn life lessons through the game. Like, if you could get that out of a clinic, I don't care if the kids never play baseball. They will come back. They will come back.
There's a saying that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Now, I say you actually can make him drink if you can make him thirsty.
Love it.
So in baseball, one of the concepts of making kids thirsty for baseball is making baseball fun, which is what you said. And so the other concept is making their skills better, helping them improve, because generally kids like things that they're good at. So you mentioned fun. What are some general ways in which practice can be fun for them? Or how would you change something from not fun to fun?
When I go into these leagues, I'm very fortunate, and I'm sure you do the same thing, speaking to parent coaches in little leagues across the county here in Westchester. I'm very fortunate. I absolutely love doing it. I say to every parent coach, I said, look, competition is a good thing, but we just have to explain it properly and do it in a structured way. I am a big fan of competition, and not only competition as far as for talent, but competition for rewarding effort, rewarding a positive attitude, rewarding the little things. That makes it fun for a kid. So like any individual or partner activity that we do, first of all, it's always duration. I like to keep it a duration as opposed to amount, because that's when amount can get discouraging for a child. Mm-hmm. When you get into that duration, how many can you do in 30 seconds as opposed to do 10, first one to sick. Then you have kids sitting around and then you get into trouble there. But competition's a great thing. I really believe competition increases focus, and, you're there to compete even at 6 years old. Kids want to compete. It's fun. So we do it in a structured manner and an effective way.
As Justin said, kids will come back to play baseball if it's fun. Kids will also come back if their skills get better, because baseball is fun if you're good at it. One way to help your kids get better at baseball is to teach them Driveline protocols. Driveline Plus is the best youth baseball resource for parents and coaches, with a growing library of the best information on baseball player development. Members will find videos on how to rethink youth baseball training, discounts on Driveline gear, and inside access to Driveline trainers. Listeners of this podcast can get $25 off their first year of Driveline Plus using the coupon code YBE. That's the letters YBE for $25 off your first year of Driveline Plus. Go to drivelinebaseball.com/plus to learn more. I love the idea of competition, and that's great to do when kids kind of have a general understanding of how to do something, so now it's kind of more like a test in a way. What about in the initial parts of the season when the kids are still trying to figure out how to catch a ball, how to hit a ball, how to throw a ball? So they're still learning, so we can't really make them compete against each other because they don't yet know what to do. So is there a way to make the initial stages of learning fun?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I will revert and go back. When I say competition, I don't necessarily mean go out there and go hit, line drives to right center, little Johnny at 5 years old. Competition as opposed to, okay, you're by yourself on a poly spot. How many clap catches can you do within 30 seconds? How many walking catches can you do within 30 seconds? That's something we do in our programs at 5 years old, and that's a competition, and it's fun, and it's a way for them to increase their focus, and they enjoy it because there's not a lot of standing around, and also it's an attainable goal for a child. It's a good scale as far as if one player is a little more advanced, you can up the scale. You could do it with like no glove. And if they're just starting, they have no idea, they could just do it with a beanbag. So that scale of skill, individual and partner activities, I think keep it the most engaging and fun at 5, 6, 7 years old because it's very controllable. I know that's kind of like an advanced answer, but I think that really keeps it structured, which in turn will keep the kids more engaged, and it's a domino effect.
I think that's really fantastic. Now, I heard you explain this a little bit on Pete Caliendo's podcast.
Who's a gem.
Pete Caliendo, who is, really, really great. So if you don't mind, like, explaining those drills, because you kind of mentioned, like, walking drill, and I don't think anybody's familiar with that. So if you don't mind explaining those to this audience here.
Absolutely. So first of all, Pete, I appreciate Peter so much, not only for him introducing you and me, but just for him being such a great ambassador for the game. He's really a gem. I know I speak for you as well. He's a gem. So, when you did these rapid fire questions, this could be one of the answers where, what do you think is crazy? I think a glove sometimes is just completely a distraction from ages like 4 to 8, almost 8, borderline 8. Maybe that's pushing it, but I'm a huge fan, as I'm sure you're already hearing me repeat it, individual catches without a glove. I think the glove could be very distracting. Like, what size glove should I get this 4-year-old? How about, like, can he catch a ball without a glove? You know what I mean? Sometimes the glove is super distracting, and just emphasizing that hand-eye coordination, whether it's with a beanbag at 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, you could start to get away from the beanbag, I think, depending on the skill. 6, 7 years old, you go to bare hand, go to tennis ball, individual, one-handed, side-to-side catches, moving while catching, clap catching. There's so many variations you could do, as opposed to trying to worry about how big a kid's glove is and how to hold the glove. I would say once you get past 6 onto 7, slowly start to introduce the glove, and then you're ready, I would say. But individual catching patterns, I guess you could say, like individual hand-eye coordination drills, such as like stuff with a beanbag and stuff with a tennis ball, stuff with a wiffle ball, throwing a ball against a wall is like a lost art. And I think maybe you're on the same page with me, which I think you are.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are very few fields that have walls anymore. But I do agree.
How about stickball, wiffle ball? But that's a whole nother podcast. But basically, I'd rather see a kid do individual catching. We run, tons of pods from ages 4 to 8, 4 to 7 years old. And like, I'm a huge proponent of just straight up do it by yourself. Without a glove, take the glove off and just walk catch, clap catch, stationary catch, create a catch. I'll tell you, that's a huge hit. When I ask kids what was your favorite part of today's pod besides the game, we call them pods. I liked making up my own catch. Give the kids creativity. We're so structured with leagues and drills. Let the kids create their own drill and let them demonstrate it to the class, to their team. And I'm talking real young here. I'm talking like 6, 7, even 8 years old. But I'm a big fan of that as opposed to partner catching right away. I like individual catching.
So when you say pod, you're referring to like a small group?
Yeah, so our company is we call it backyard pods. We have 27 pods going a week on top of running practices for other teams, birthday parties, clinics, etc. But our main, and private lessons obviously, but our main core of the company, really busy part of the schedule, are these pods. So they're like instructional. We'll do drills in the beginning and then instructional gameplay, which is, I think, so vital.
So do you have any fun ways for teammates to get to know each other at the beginning of the season?
Absolutely. So we always got to start with a warm-up. I also am not a fan of standing in a line. That's something that I have learned that a lot of times at the youth level, lines cause troubles. So I like to just let them get into their own space, and we'll do running, we'll do jogging, we'll do high knees, but do it in their own space. So everyone could do it. If you have a big enough field, everyone could do it. And they don't have to be standing in a line. You just have to know your space and make sure they're not crashing into each other, because that's part of baseball too, is spatial awareness. I play a game called rock, paper, scissors fitness. It's a way for them to work out. They have to interact. They have to connect. And basically they do rock, paper, scissors, but it's partner fitness. And they get to know each other's names. They have to introduce each other. They have to do a fist bump, an elbow, or a selfie before they start doing their partner fitness.
So explain the partner fitness part to me.
It's a great question, great segue. The social emotional connection. I'll say anyone with black shorts on, anyone with white shorts on, find someone with white shorts on, find someone with blue sneakers on. So they're not just with their buddies as a partner the whole time. It's random. So I think that's another part to tell any youth coach, because that's going to happen. They're going to want to be buddy with their friends. But that's how you make new friends, by mixing it up and meeting other, new kids within the pod or the team. Make it random, like anyone with a yellow hat on or whatever it is. And then they basically just partner up, and it usually works out pretty well. It works out pretty well where they find a kid they might not have been with if you didn't do that setup, if that makes sense.
So you're saying they just you're helping them find a random partner, and then they're doing some
let them, and here's another tip I will say, let the kids figure it out. You give them the structure, you give them the instruction, and then you become the facilitator. And I'm sure you heard that on Pete Caliendo's podcast, but it's true. Like, give them the structure on what to do. Find someone with blue shorts or find whatever it is. Let them problem solve and let them figure it out. It's very easy. And even, I would have done this 2 years ago, to jump in and try to fix it. Let them do it. That's that youth development portion for being a coach. Let them figure it out. And then obviously if they need help after a while, they can come to you, but let them figure it out.
When you say figure it out, what is the it? Figure what out?
So figure it out like, we both I can't find a partner. I have.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So sorry, I explained that last part right. But that's a teaching portion, that, social interaction, that COVID, by the way, as I'm sure you know, definitely put a delay on a lot of our kids with the social, emotional, connection. And even a kid arguing with another kid. In a weird way, coach, it's almost healthy, because it means that there's conflict. How do they solve that? And if a coach can step in and help them do that, that's a great thing.
So then you have them partner up, and then they do some activity together. So explain how the rock, paper, scissors thing works.
Yeah, so basically, it's just a fun warm up to do, just to get the kids moving and doing exercises. So they'll do either body, rock, paper, scissor fitness, like they literally do make a rock with their body, or a scissors, with their feet.
Oh, got it.
And it's just a fun way to keep the kids moving and making up their own exercise.
Now, do you do team building games for kids to develop team unity, or is that something that just kind of happens?
Very, very basic, which I know is not a uncommon drill. Is just a relay cut drill. Whether that's, we got a pod of 8 kids or maybe not 8, but let's just say 12 kids, you do 4 lines of 3, and they just either, depending on the age, you could do a relay drill of ground balls or cutoff drill, start to teach them that even at 6, 7 years old. Obviously you'd have to abbreviate it due to the skill level and the age and where they're at, but that's a team building skill 100%. And I'm a big fan of that. And also it limits the standing around, which is the devil at a youth baseball practice.
Absolutely. So I also feel like rules are important, because kids enjoy the game more when they understand how it works. But at the same time, talking about rules could be potentially boring to kids. So do you teach rules to kids? And if you do, how do you teach it in a way that keeps their interest?
Oh, instructional gameplay is really where I do it. I mean, yes, you want to teach totally what you're saying, depending on the age, even at 11, 12, 13, it could get dragged out. So, you have to be it goes back to being in a player's shoes. I think instructional gameplay and stopping the game for those teachable moments is the best ideal way to teach the rules. So when a situation, for example, I had a 7-year-old pod today, rare at that level, the kid hits a missile and it hits the kid in the helmet who's running from first to second. So the batter hit the ball and it hit the runner running from first to second. Stop the game, explain the rules, explain what happens when when the ball gets hit by a runner. I think those teachable moments, that's the best way to do it. So you're not standing there like a lecturer for 20 minutes, because the kids want to move. You could do it while they're moving and in motion, gameplay.
So let's say 6, 7, 8-year-olds, do you have a way of teaching them the difference between a force play and a tag play? Something like that?
I do. So I'll just put runners on base and we'll just simulate what you do. Say, okay, John, what do you do if you get the ball? There's a runner on first and second. Now, again, I know this is done in Little League practices. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. but they need to visually see it. I think a lot of times they'll just say, you got to run around first, you got to run around second, but they need, especially children, they need to visually see a physical runner on first and a physical runner on second and understand the concept of why the third baseman steps on third. Why? Because there's someone behind you at first, there's someone behind you at second. So they're forced to run to the next base. So giving them those visuals and explaining and emphasizing the word like forced and not forced and stopping the game. Like we had that situation where we were playing today and a runner was on third and I said, if Johnny ran home to, I got to stop using Johnny. I got to think of a new name. If Johnny came home from third to home and no one else is on base, would he be out if they touch home plate? And things like that, just stopping the game, teaches them so much more than just sitting there and lecturing for 40 minutes.
For sure. All right, so let's say a youth coach has a 1.5 hour block for practice. What would you recommend are the skills you should always cover, and how much time would you say that the coach should devote to each skill?
Very good. Now, just to go further, what age bracket would you say?
Let's say you go by the age brackets that you think would be different.
Okay. So as you go up the scale, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I am going to start even before that. I think having a pregame structure, not, whether it's stretching, running, whatever it is, that's not only teaching them, obviously, the mechanics of actually getting loose before a game, which a 6-year-old doesn't really need to get loose, but you're teaching them structure. They know what they're doing, just like they'd come into a gymnasium in a phys ed class. In a baseball practice, they know what they're doing. They have a routine. I think that's very important. That's why school's so important. Obviously, besides education, but structure. So I would say day one, establish structure. Like when you get to the field, this is what we're going to do. Then you're going to talk about catch, whether that's individual for a 7, 8-year-old or whether that's 9, 10U travel and you're talking about proper catch. Okay, so I'm a fan, and I know you talk to you personally for sure, talk to coaches all over the world, but I'm a fan of progressions. I think most quality coach will agree with me on that one. Progressions, whether that's a wide base stationary throwing where they're not stepping or just going with their front knee up and emphasizing their upper body, whatever progression in catching. And if you're talking 6, 7U T-ball, individual partner activities as their first thing they do when they get to the field. So structure and then catching, throwing has to be, I think, number one before you do anything. And then I would just progress to the practice plan and address to the players' needs. If they're having trouble understanding what a force out is, and you see that in a game and they're 6, 7 years old, what do I do with the ball? Go with that. One thing I would say, it's such a it's a great question. There's so many areas I could go down, coach. But let's just say it's 7U, 6U T-ball practice, right? You have one practice a week, or let's just say an 8U practice. Situational gameplay, like I would do with a 6-year-old pod. I would say after you do your throwing, catch, and aggressions, whether that's an infield, outfield, or situational gameplay. I really think you could do that in an entire practice.
Yeah.
What do I do when I get the ball? Where do I go with the ball? I think that's very important to cover.
Absolutely.
And then you progress to the fun stuff, to the batting practice. Now, you can do variations of that, and you could do situational gameplay with batting practice. Or you could do it with a parent coach or any coach hitting them balls and saying, okay, when I hit you this ball, what do you do? But it's also great live off the bat. And then you can obviously get into station work, which I think obviously goes without saying, whether it's hitting stations or pitching stations, and there's plenty of drills I could send anyone that's listening.
All right, hope you enjoyed part 1 of my interview with Justin Sherman. I've said it before that major props goes out to all of you rec coaches. It's easier to be a select or travel team coach where you have an entire team of players who are already highly skilled. But you can see whether a coach is truly a good coach if he can take a team of entry-level players and make them better. Hopefully this episode helps you coaches with beginner players. Thanks to Justin for being on the show. And now it's time for the question of the week.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Before we begin this week's question, Austin Wasserman answered me back about the last question of the week, which was about cardio for warm-ups and how to do warm-ups. And here's what he said. Dynamic warm-up should be a part of every practice in some way. Athletes should learn how to do them on their own. We use lightning bands, lightning balls, and just body weight exercises to warm up the body. Yes, warm up pre-pitching and recover post. So Austin did not specifically say cardio, but he did say dynamic warm-up. He also gave me a couple links to some free downloads and equipment that he sells on his website. So I'll post those in the show notes for today's episode, which is youthbaseballedge.com/session149. Now, this week's question is from Aaron Jacobs in New Rochelle, New York, and he asks, "Hey Rob, how many players is ideal for a varsity baseball team to have? Our team represents a campus that has 6 high schools. This is my second year coaching, and I have 13 returning players from last season. I have 7 graduating seniors, and I'm probably taking 6 to 7 new players. Most of the new guys are able to pitch, which is a plus. Is 18 to 20 players too many?" Hey Aaron, thanks for the question.
Hey, Ron, where are you? Where is Ron right now?
I don't think 18 to 20 players is too many for a varsity baseball team if you can get the extra players sufficient work. And that's a pretty big stipulation. So here's what I mean. I'm all about fair playing time, player development, and love the game. Probably to a fault. I hate sitting kids disproportionately more than other kids, even if it's warranted. All kids want to play, and sitting on the bench sucks. Now that said, at the varsity level, winning is one of the top priorities, along with helping your seniors get to the next level if that's what they aspire to. Winning not only helps your seniors, but it also helps you in your program to recruit top players to join your team. So you need to play your best players to win, and your best players need all the playing time they can get so they can get noticed by scouts and whatnot. So winning is super important, and this is all assuming that your varsity team plays in state playoffs. Now, if you shorten your roster down to, say, 12 or 13 players, that is going to mean 6 to 8 players would get cut. And that can be demoralizing to some kids, and they may never come back to baseball. Not everyone is like Michael Jordan or today's guest, Justin Sherman, where they say, "I'm going to work harder." Some kids simply say, "I've got other interests, so I'll try those instead." And I'd hate for that unnecessary experience to happen to kids. Now, keeping 18 to 20 players across 6 high schools also makes it easier for each school to have some representation on the varsity team, which naturally is going to generate more school spirit for the team across the various schools. So, if you keep 18 to 20 players, then what you're going to do is essentially have 2 teams, your A team and your B team. Your A team is your starting group, and I'd make that group subject to change throughout the season, meaning you might promote a player off the B team at any point in the season if he's working hard enough and he's shown that he's better than one of the A team players. So this kind of always open roster for the A team will motivate most kids to keep working hard, whether they're on the B team or on the A team, because now the A team players will want to stay on the A team. And also, when you teach and ingrain your coaching philosophy, your team culture, and your system to the team, you're teaching all of that to both your A team and your B team players, which means that when the A team kids graduate, the B team kids can step up and fill in seamlessly, since they're already immersed in your way of doing things, which makes for a smooth transition for the new A team. So the only problem that I see with having a roster of 18 to 20 kids is that your B team kids potentially could just sit on the bench most of the season, which, as I said, I just hate to have that happen. So to alleviate that problem and to keep developing your B team, here's a couple suggestions for you. 1, schedule some games for the B team against other schools. So it could be a doubleheader against the other school's varsity team, where the A team plays game 1 of the doubleheader and the B team plays game 2 of the doubleheader. Or you could maybe just schedule the B team to play against the other school's JV team. The second option is to have the B team play against the A team in games on your own home field, complete with umpires, working scoreboards, stats, and everything. And since you mentioned that you have pretty good pitching depth, these games can help keep the non-A team pitchers sharp. And so those are 2 pretty helpful options that I think can keep your B team players sharp. And of course, if you can do both, where you schedule games against other schools and schedule games against your own A team, then do both. As for practices, you can keep all 18 to 20 players busy, giving them good work and not having a lot of standing around by dividing your team up into small groups. And I mentioned how to do this in session 140, which is the lessons learned episode for 2020. So check that out, along with the show notes for that episode, where I show a screenshot of a Vanderbilt practice involving a lot of players. That's youthbaseballedge.com/session140. Not saying it'll be easy to keep all 20 kids busy, just saying that it can be done. Aaron, hope that answers your question. And for those of you listening, if you have your own question that you'd like to have answered, you can head over to youthbaseballedge.com/askrob, and you can ask your question right there on that page. There are two ways in which you can ask your question, either in the online form, just fill that out, or by leaving a voicemail message. Either way, I'll get to your question in a future podcast episode.
Oh, that's fun.
If you have not subscribed to the email newsletter, I want to encourage you to join Edge Nation by email. Email subscribers are the first to know when a new podcast episode is released, and you get special privileges like being automatically entered for giveaways and special announcements. To sign up for the email newsletter, just go to any page on the youthbaseballedge.com website, and there should be a sign-up box on every page of the site, so you can't miss it. Lastly, as of this recording, it's mid-November, so most fall ball leagues have just wrapped up or have wrapped up a week or two ago. So here's your friendly reminder to do your Open Baseball Journal session for this past fall with your kids. If you don't know what the Open Baseball Journal, or OBJ, is, it's a notebook where you ask your baseball kids a series of 10 open-ended questions, and they give you their honest answers without you defending yourself or otherwise correcting them. It's one of the best ways to get feedback on what you can do better for your own kid next season. If you'd like a refresher on how to do the OBJ or what questions to ask, check out session 105 of the podcast. So put the OBJ on your calendar and be ready to do some good listening. That'll do it for this show. In the next show, we'll keep mining info about how to help those entry-level players with Justin. So until then, be blessed and be a blessing. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Youth Baseball Edge podcast. You can find us at youthbaseballedge.com.